Thank you so much, Dr. Shiro. And now I'll welcome to the table Judge Fidel, Judge Noel Fidel, Cindy Schlosser, and Marco Galvino. I'll put up names there for you.
First, thank you to Evelyn Cruz and to the staff at law school. I spent 6 very good years for hosting this. I was here after my judicial career, and can't tell you what a treat it is for a lawyer to go back to law school when you actually know something about what you're studying again, and bring some experience to the studies. And there's no more intense way to study law than to have to teach it. So it's good to be back, and thank you to Evelyn and the staff, and to Human Rights First for putting on this program. I will...
Can you speak up, please?
Yeah, sure. Is this a mic? I'll move it closer.
It's not a mic, actually. It's just a recording.
Oh, well,
You just gotta-
psychologically, it'll remind me to speak up.
Just hold it up now.
Yeah, that would do it. Thanks. My own experience with the world of immigration and detention has come during the last 8 years or so. Oh, thanks. When I've been on the board and chairing the board of the Florence Immigrant and Refugee Rights Project, and you'll be hearing from others from the project, from the board and the staff later, and most immediately from Cindy Schlosser, who is on this panel and is our social services coordinator, and whose job takes her from Florence to Eloy to Phoenix and back again, circuit riding among all of the places where we staff and provide services to those who are in detention, including juveniles in detention, who range in age from almost 18 to what, 5? Is that the youngest that we see? And we'll hear on this panel from Marco Galvino, who has been a detainee, and who will describe his experiences as such. First, let me expand just briefly on the remarks that Commissioner Shiro made a few moments ago. There are, in any given day, some 33,400, according to Commissioner Shiro, immigrants in detention in the United States, in facilities around the United States, most of them remote. These include asylum seekers who have come here hoping to qualify under United States law for asylum or refugees, and they're subject to the mandatory detention requirements that Commissioner Shiro spoke of. The cost of detention is estimated to be something around $122 per day per detainee. The costs for alternative release programs is estimated varyingly from anywhere from $8.50 to $22 a day for those on release in various degrees of supervision. With the budgetary problems that this country is confronting and that have been so much a part of the debates in this election year, why aren't we focusing more on those cost differences? The cost savings is clear. There are, to be sure, concerns with effective supervision, making sure that those who are on release will appear for various proceedings as required, and that has been addressed. It was addressed in the 80s and 90s by a pilot program run by the Vera Institute. It's being addressed now by a pilot program run by the Lutheran, the LIRS, which has issued papers and is undertaking studies on the effectiveness of its present pilot program. We need to focus this morning on what an example of an effective release program can be, and talk somewhat about the individualized assessment programs for detainees that would be necessary, and what they might involve in order to meet the kinds of security issues that are part of the concern. But in order to do that, in order to have that focus and make it part of the discussion, we need to move, as Commissioner Schiro urged us to do a moment ago, from a kind of abstract focus on the immigrant population as a whole, one that, as she says, blurs the conversation, to an individualized focus on the kinds of people who are in detention, the kinds of people who are in mandatory detention, and what it would take to achieve both the cost savings and the human savings that we could achieve by moving toward individualized assessment and incarceration alternatives. With that introduction, let me turn first to Cindy, who can tell us about her experience with these issues.
Thank everybody for coming and engaging in these really incredible conversations that are very important to not only what's going on here in Arizona, but across the country. I'll just... Is everybody able to hear this now? Okay. So yeah, as Noel said, I work with the Florence Immigrant and Refugee Rights Project, which is an office of a nonprofit organization that provides free legal services to individuals who are in immigration custody, and we're going through legal immigration proceedings in front of an immigration judge. Currently, on any given day in Arizona, there are around 3,000 individuals who are in ICE custody in Arizona, and that, like Noel said earlier, I don't know if you want to call me.
No, I'm doing business as Noel.
That includes unaccompanied minors who are in the custody of the Office of Refugee Resettlement through ICE, as well as adults who are detained in Florence and Eloy, which is about an hour to an hour and a half from Phoenix and Tucson. So they're in really remote locations, which is true of most detention facilities around the country. So we work, the focus of the Florence project is to provide legal services to these individuals. And initially, the individuals who started working at the Florence project focused solely on the legal issues that people were confronted with when they were going through proceedings. And as the project grew and they delved further into the issues, they saw that there were other needs and other issues that came up. And so the role of social services coordinator or social worker they saw that as also being necessary to address other needs that folks were facing while in custody. And so part of my role as the social services coordinator, together with other attorneys and legal assistants on the staff, is to, as I said before, there are 3,000 folks in custody only in Arizona, and that other organizations and individuals around the country who are working with in similar capacities are kind of in a response mode to this huge number of people that we're trying to work with. And I see some other folks who work with individuals in detention nodding their heads, and the Restoration Project as well, that while addressing the gaping wound of, it's kind of a logical next step to think about why are these people here? Do they need to be in custody? Are there ways in which we could address this in a more logical manner in order to more effectively address the needs of people who are going through proceedings in a more cost-effective and also more humane way? And can that be done? And so we, about 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, started meeting with some individuals in Tucson who were really interested in, kind of stemmed from their involvement with a couple of LGBT individuals who were in custody, who they were working with, and they came to the facilities in Florence and saw this person is an asylum seeker. They haven't, why are they in the jail? They just couldn't understand. There's barbed wire, there are big galley doors, there's cement walls, they're in uniforms, they're in shackles. Why is this happening to this person? And they were just blown away and thought, we need, what's going on here? We need to do something. And so that initial conversation with them about what immigration detention is and why it exists to ensure that people show up for court, basically, is what initially got individuals from the community involved and concerned about what is happening and why detention is necessary or unnecessary, kind of struggling with that question. And so together with the Restoration Project in Tucson, we've been trying to communicate with ICE and to request release for certain individuals, certain populations that may be more sympathetic, whatever that definition may be, to try to get them released to the Restoration Project, Casa, Mariposa in Tucson. And since those initial conversations, we've had quite a number of individuals, clients who we've been working with, who've been released to the Restoration Project, as well as a new network of volunteers in Phoenix who've been opening their homes, their personal homes, and providing transportation, legal transportation to their legal appointments, to the bus station to get to their final destinations, and things like that. And it's been quite a bit of work that we've been talking with the Restoration Project, that it is there are a lot of resources that are needed from these, from the actual, the alternative to detention, the programs that are in the community supporting individuals after they've been released. And so we've been kind of learning together and figuring out what we need, and whether it's financial support or kind of legal counsel for individuals, medical assistance, things like that, food and clothing. So it's the basic needs, and it's been working. And so through over the past couple of years, the restoration project itself has started communicating more directly with ICE about issues of release, about safe release, when to release certain individuals at like what times of the day, where to release them, and things like that. And so it's been moving along. And so that's kind of where the connection first started, and kind of what we've been seeing recently.
Okay. We'll turn to Marco next, and then open it up for questions. Marco Galvino was detained for, was it 7 years? 7.5 years before, while his case was pending, before being released to the restoration project. And we'll ask Marco to tell us about his experience.
Okay, good morning. The first one, I have the bad news. The bad news is my Google translation today is broken. I use the CD translation for me.
I'll
Okay.
try.
I speak English, but I'm more comfortable today speaking Spanish. Okay, it's fine for everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The first one, okay, Spanish. Okay, the first one, I thank you for this opportunity to come here for speaking us, share my experience I have in the detention. Through 7.5 years is no good time. You know, I see a lot of situations. I participate a lot experiences where that is very, very bad. You know, discrimination situation. You have the same treatment. It's the criminal. Okay, but for me. It's incredible, came here after 7.5 years. In 4 days more, I complete 6 months, get releasing from the detention, immigration. I don't believe came here. You know, this is the second conference care participation is the dream. I think this is American dream, you know. 6 months before, I don't think I'm here. I thank you for the Florence immigration. It helped me a lot. It's in connection with the Casa Mariposa. And Casa Mariposa is the group, the community group in Tucson que help the people in the state immigration. Okay? Eu cheguei a Casa Mariposa depois de 7 anos de la detenção e imigração. Estou em três diferentes instalações de ICE, em PCJ, Florence, and SPC.
So I arrived in Casa Mariposa after being in immigration custody for 7 years in Florence, Arizona. I was detained in 3 different places, the Service Processing Center in Florence, a CCA facility, and the Pinal County Jail, all 3 of which ICE uses to detain immigrants. With honest people, who are honest working people, who only want to get ahead in life and have a better future.
Assim, se me pergunta sobre a alternativa da detenção, le ruego que miramos alternativas reais. Que em lugar de hablar de programas de supervisão ou pulseiras eletrônicas, hablamos de dar documentos de trabalho, visas, vivienda, estampillas de comida, assistência jurídica, assistência de advogado grátis para poder ajudar com seus casos nas cortes, para que as pessoas que estão esperando seus cortes em liberdade sem que estejam na casa de imigração esperando por seus casos anos.
And this is why they're asking me to speak about alternatives to detention. And I pray to you that you look at real alternatives. Instead of speaking about programs, supervision programs, or electronic bracelets, we need to talk about giving people documents, work permission, visas, housing, food stamps, judicial assistance, and access to free attorneys who can help them with their legal cases. And for people who are waiting for court, when we're free,
With the kids, with the decision cases.
oh yeah, and so when they're free, it's easier to wait for my case, or their cases outside because cases are pending for years and years.
Atualmente, em vários centros de detenção, há pessoas que têm mais de 10 anos peleando por o direito de estar ao lado de seus filhos, esposas, madres, irmãos, pessoas que solamente conhecem os Estados Unidos como seu país.
Right now, in various detention centers, there are people who have been waiting for more than 10 years fighting their cases without being together with their children, their wives, their mothers, their brothers, and other people who they only know as their home being in the United States.
Porque muitos deles foram traídos a esse país quando eram bebês, ninhos, e foram dar-se conta que eram legais em esse país quando em sua maior idade, quizá quando tiveram que buscar trabalho e não tinham social security.
A lot of these individuals were brought to the United States when they were very young, when they were babies, and they only realized that they didn't have proper documentation in this country when they were adults, and maybe when they had to start looking for work and realized they didn't have a social security number.
Se a gente que tem essas coisas que necessitam, alimento, roupas, vivenda, transporte, apoio legal, permisso de trabalho e esperam uma oportunidade de ganhar seu caso, são extremamente prováveis que apresentem a um tribunal e terão que estar em uma detenção sendo tratados como criminais, animais, com torturas físicas ou mentais, que são as piores.
If individuals have the things that they need, like food, clothing, a place to live, transportation, legal support, work permission, while they're waiting for their cases, and also an opportunity to fight their case, it is very extremely likely that they will present themselves in court. They don't have to be in detention, being treated like criminals, like animals, with torture that's physically torturous as well as mentally torturous, which is the worst.
Casa Mariposa é uma comunidade intencional em Tucson, Arizona, que apoia pessoas de detenção, de imigração e aqueles liberados. Mantenemos uma casa de 7 dormitórios, onde voluntários e hóspedes vivem juntos, comem juntos e trabalham juntos.
Now I'm going to speak about the Casa Mariposa, where I live. Casa Mariposa is an intentional community in Tucson, Arizona, that supports people in detention as well as individuals who have been released from detention. We maintain a house with seven bedrooms where volunteers and guests live together, we eat together, and we work together.
Os hóspedes que vivem na Casa Mariposa de detenção recebem lugar para viver, comida, conexão, alívio legal e serviços sociais, conexão a classes de idiomas e uma comunidade de apoio.
The guests who live at Casa Mariposa, who have left detention, are received into a home where they can live, that has food, connections, legal connections, social services, and connections to language classes and a supportive community.
Nós outros oferecido a centro de pessoas a curto prazo com vivenda, que são liberadas da detenção em seu caminho hacia outras partes do país, assim como dezenas de hospitalidade e pessoas por longos períodos de tempo, que já são liberadas da detenção e tratando de empezar uma vida aqui em Tucson.
They have offered hundreds of people short-term housing who have been released from detention and who are on their way to live in other parts of the country. And also dozens of individuals who have been staying with them for the long term, who have been freed from detention and who are trying to start a new life here in Tucson.
Casa Mariposa é parte de uma rede nacional de comunidades similares, que somos parte de Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service e na rede de apoio da Presbyterian Church United States.
Casa Mariposa is part of an internet or a national network of similar communities who are supported by the Lutheran Immigrant and Refugee Services, as well as the support network through the Presbyterian Church of the United States.
Todas as comunidades prestam serviço de apoio às pessoas que estão em liberdade como parte de apoio para que as pessoas não necessitem estar detenidas para comparecer a uma corte e estar lejos da detenção como meio de controlar a população de imigração.
All of these communities are supporting individuals who have been freed from detention, and they are supporting these people who need access to legal services after they've been released from detention.
Para controlar.
And individuals who are in detention as a way to control the immigration population.
Sorry, I write in Spanish and Portuguese. Okay. This is bad, eu speak it really good, speak it. Eu estou agradecido por viver na comunidade hoje, por aún mais desejar que nada tenha que passar pelo que eu ha vivido, estar detenidos e não poder ver o sol, a sair, a comer, entende? Mas meio de utilizar confinamento como meio de controle, recomendando visas acessíveis, documentos de trabalho, assistência jurídica, vivenda, alimentos, roupas e outras necessidades.
I'm very grateful to live in the community today, but even even above that, wish that nobody would ever have to live through what I lived through, to be detained, to live without seeing the sun, and
Portuguese.
And that nobody should have to live through an institution that uses confinement as a means of controlling. And I recommend that individuals have access to visas, to work permission, legal assistance, free legal assistance, a home, food, clothing, medicine, and other needs.
In my opinion, the alternate for detention is freedom. But if you don't have the alternate for the home supports with the Casa Mariposa, Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. Sorry for my Google translation this morning is broken, but I have seen it here. Okay, anyone speak with me questions? Okay. Oh, sorry. This day, T-shirt from the Casa Mariposa. Somebody's like to make donation. This house is leaving the donations. Okay, thank you. I have more over there, maybe 20.
Let me ask you a question,
Okay.
Marco. Could you describe your day-to-day life at the Casa Mariposa? What was it like?
Well, the Casa Mariposa is funny, It's funny and responsible house because the first one is a security place. The people know in the courts now the judges say, oh, the Casa Mariposa. The first time I sent my support letter from the Casa Mariposa, the judge, you can live in Tucson, the Casa Mariposa. Okay, I give the ball, And the Casa Mariposa, day a day is make the name, because it's the security place is the true place, and the people trust. Every Wednesday night have the community dinner, all the people go over there for share the food. Sundays nights have the meeting too for a discussion about the problems we have for the new people, the support letters. I make the programs now, make the contact with people, still in detention, send the letters, send the hope cards, okay, hey, keep strong, you know. I may have 7 years, the people, oh, you're 7 years in freedom, great, I can do it too, you know. Have a lot of people can have me over there, maybe, idol, you know, Marco's idol, Marco having here 7 years. If you might can do it, I can do it too, you know. Yeah.
And Cindy, can you just talk about the clients you see, the range of problems that you have to deal with on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis? Give some examples.
Yeah, I think there's oftentimes a lot of talk about people receiving just a host of different issues depending on their life situation. There are parents in custody who have kids on the outside. There are asylum seekers like certain individuals who have been mentioned already who are just coming to the United States, and the only reason they're coming is to seek protection. There are people who've been living in the United States for many, many years who have their whole lives here. They've been working, they have their families, and for some reason or another were caught up in either the criminal justice system, which funneled them to immigration custody, or were caught up for another reason and brought into custody. And so there are people, and also here on the border, a lot of people we see are just coming across the border and are picked up in the desert. So the people we see just come from just like anywhere, inside or outside of custody, just come from a wide variety of backgrounds and reasons for coming to and living in the United States. And so they face all of the real world issues that we are facing as well on the outside. We've been seeing, and Lindsay Marshall, the director of the Florence Project, as well as some other folks in the state with Pat Manning, we've been seeing a higher number, and I don't know if it's just because we're asking more questions, of parents who are in custody and have their children either in CPS custody or living with another abusive parent, or maybe they were single and now the kids are staying with either a relative or a non-relative friend or a church person or somebody they may not know very well or trust. And so the parents are oftentimes faced with the issue of the question of, do I stay here detained and fight my case, which may lead to me ultimately losing my parental rights, losing my children? Or do I just take a quick deportation order, whether I have an immigration case or not, but I may be able to keep my kids? And I don't know about you all, I don't know. But that's not a question I would like to have to make a decision on. And so there are a lot of parents, mothers and fathers, who, regardless of criminal history or whatever, they're faced with the question of, do I stay here and try to stay in the United States where they may have been living for decades, or do I give that all up and try to keep my kids? So it's a really big issue, and there have been a lot of recent reports written lately about that. One by the University of Arizona professor Nina Raven, you all may want to check out. And there's so a lot of parents in custody, and a lot of asylum seekers as well, people with severe medical issues and mental illness that don't always understand the proceedings, why they're going to court. I just spoke with a woman the other day who suffered a traumatic brain injury when she was 13 in the car accident. And my first question was, do you know why you're here? And she's like, I don't know, they put this suit on me, and my kids are at home. I don't know. I had haven't been able to call my parents. She didn't understand what the purpose of her going to court was. And so she was receiving medical treatment on the outside. And anytime that that's interrupted or support systems are interrupted with people who are suffering mental illness, it's really traumatic. And so there are just a whole host of issues that are wrapped up just in the detention system itself. And a lot of when there are high numbers of people who are in custody, who are high stress. There are a lot of people who have stress, anxiety, depression, trouble sleeping, and they say, I've never had this before. I've never had high blood pressure. I've never had heart problems. I've never been stressed out in my life. I've never, and now that I'm here, I can't sleep. All I think about is my kids, my case, am I going to be deported? And so new medical issues start coming up, along with whether they're physical medical or psychological, mental health issues. And so, which leads to medicating that may not be necessary if they were out with their families. And so some of these issues that people are facing wouldn't be present if they were out in the community with their families. Medical issues. I was just talking with the other woman who was going to be on the panel, and she was in Eloy Detention Center for almost a year. Is it a year? And she was 9 months.
Yes.
While she was there, she was receiving a lot of medication for sleeping, for depression, for stress.
16.
Yeah.
I take 16 pills over there
Yeah.
all day.
And did you take medicine before?
No.
Yeah.
I take 16 medication over there. Yeah, 6 for depression, for mania depressivo, for sleeping, for everything.
Are you on any medication?
No, I don't take medication. No. I don't want. I sleep very well. I don't have depression problems. I feel very well.
So there are a lot of people whose personal situations are really impacted just by physically being in
Yeah.
custody.
More mental.
And so, yeah, mental.
Mental is the hard problem over there. You know, you feel so much depression. You know, can't sleeping because living in one place 24 hours. When you sleep, you shower, and you have recreation, you see the TV. You don't have windows. You don't have the sun, heat, nothing. It's very, very depression.
And so it's really clear that, like Marco was the example, that once that person is removed from that punitive setting where things are regulated, where things are really high stress, there's no control over nutrition, medical care, contact with family or contact with legal services, that the individual's personal needs are obviously affected. And so the alternatives to detention clearly address those needs just naturally by nature of being back with support systems, with families, with open communication, freedom, freedom of movement, freedom to choose foods and things like that.
Let me raise one other question before I turn it over to the rest of you for questions. Back in the 80s and 90s, when the Vera Institute was running its pilot program with individualized risk assessment and alternatives to detention, it had a compliance rate of somewhere approaching 90% with people, appearing for all court appearances and complying with all requirements. Vera is no stranger to this. I mean, back when I was in law school in the 60s, a few of us in the audience remember the 60s. Vera was exploring this new concept called OR release on one's own recognizance. It was a new concept then. It's integrated into the practices of, I assume, all of the states now, and enormous cost savings. We haven't been able to achieve that yet in the civil detention system, in the immigration detention system. But what internal constraints provide this impetus to compliance for those who are released, and what external constraints are there from programs like Casa, Mariposa, and the Restoration Project that help to provide that assurance? And I'll ask both Cindy and Marco.
First, the ladies first.
So just to clarify, what prevents ICE from making decisions to release? And also
What helps to make those who are released comply with all of their requirements, rather than, I assume, the fear that some in Congress had, and maybe a majority in Congress acted on when they established mandatory detention programs.
Is this still working?
Just talk about it.
I'll just talk loudly. Yeah, I think a big piece is support in the. Thank you, mechanic. Is basically ICE. ICE ultimately wants individuals to show up for court, and that's kind of the goal, the central goal of when they're asking us, when we're making release plans for individuals, are they going to show up for court? And if they are ordered deported, are they going to show up for a deportation appointment? Are they going to show up for a deportation hearing? And when we think about release as an organization, or when I'm making a release plan, I'm thinking, yeah, are they going to show up for court, but are they also, what does that mean? What needs to be in place in order for that person to be able to get to court? They need to make sure that their kids are taken care of. If they have a hearing or an appointment for with their attorney, do they have access to legal services? Because if they don't have access to legal services, they may not be able to fight a case, or they may be afraid of what's awaiting them at court or at an appointment with an immigration officer. And so it's not just, are you going to show up for court? You need to promise me that you're going to show up for court, but are all the other aspects and supports in place to facilitate that person actually being able to get to court and understanding the proceedings? Yeah. And so I think, and I think the Restoration Project and other organizations are becoming more aware of what all is entailed, and through our conversations with them, that ICE officers who operate the facility in Eloy, and we're trying to talk with them about the specific needs that they were seeing at the Greyhound station, that people needed warm sweatshirts, that they were cold. So just really basic needs. They were cold. They hadn't eaten since 11 o'clock in the morning sometimes. They didn't understand. They weren't able to make a phone call to family members to let them know that they were getting out that day. So really basic, simple things. And so I think immediately for a while after they had the conversation with ICE, they were seeing, oh, this person has a sweatshirt, or this person actually has shoelaces to tie their shoes, and things like that. So there were little things, and they were able to make phone calls to their family members. So there have been little steps like that
Are you saying that was a temporary thing, or that's?
Well, recently, within the last couple months, they've started releasing people to the Phoenix bus station, so we haven't been able to see what's been going on recently. So because the Tucson bus station closes very early. But so there are little steps and little successes like that. And at the same time, when we are going to immigration to request release for somebody initially before they're actually released, there are quite a few roadblocks before actually getting to the step of them being released. And recently, and many of you may be familiar with, recent memos that have been released by ICE addressing the issues of prosecutorial discretion and certain individuals who fall into categories that are more that will be eligible for release, or that ICE will consider for release, or to decide to prosecute a case or pursue a case or not. And those are usually appeals to the individual immigration officers who are in charge of people's cases, as well as the field office director here in Phoenix. So,
Yes.
Thank you all so much for your remarks, and especially Marco for joining us in
Thank you.
English, Spanish, and Portuguese.
In Portuguese, yes.
So I have a question about funding of a project like restoration project at Casa Mariposa, which is, right now, of course, as Judge Fidel mentioned, LIRS and Presbyterians are funding, are providing financial support for programs like Restoration Project and other community-based release programs across the country. And the idea from LIRS's perspective, I know, because I talked to them in DC, is that this is a pilot program that one day perhaps ICE might own itself and provide federal funding for. So my question is, do you want federal money? Does Casa Mariposa, this restoration project, want federal money and want to enter into that type of contractual agreement with ICE? Is that a good direction to be moving in? And if not, what do you want? What do we want?
Well, good question. I think it's very one, the Casa Mariposa in another house, keeping receiving money for the community, not involve the federal funds. Because I believe if you in this position, you need to follow the rules for the federals, And I think it's a better one. You can have the free community. You can have your own decision, and you can depend for the Congress, not depend for the Senate. Okay, I give you the fund, but you can do this. You can have the 7 rooms. You can have this. You can give it this food. I think the better one you can receive it, the non-profit money, you can receive the profit money, and you can follow the rules. It is my opinion. I don't know if it's the same. I believe the Casa Mariposa share the same opinion me, not the community. Now the Casa Mariposa receiving the donation, the house. Some women they buy the house for the Casa Mariposa is the donation this house, and it's leaving the donation the people. I think this is my opinion. I think the federal funds, but any help is very welcome.
I know actually from Ruthie, who posed the question, and from material that she provided me from the Lutheran Immigrant and Refugee Service and from the Presbyterian Church, and from human rights own studies, that the federal budget for ICE detention is $2 billion a year. And the federal budget for alternatives to detention is $72 million a year. All of this, with our current budgetary issues. That is simply out of line with, with the realities of effective budgeting, let alone with the principle that Commissioner Schreiro announced at the beginning, that civil detention can never be used for purposes of punishment. The 7.5 years that Marco described to us earlier certainly sound like punishment to me. What kind of constraints that government money would impose on programs that provided alternatives to detention would have to be negotiated. I think the pressing matter is to get those funds up and out, try to create some amendments to the mandatory detention requirements, and begin to see more federal money flow to, if not to Casa Mariposa itself, to alternative detention programs. If and when we can bring that about, we'll probably have fights over the constraints that the federal money might impose, but change is incremental. I think we'd like to see the money there for those programs. Yes?
Well, if you break that $2 billion down to Marco, that's at $122 a day, which is what you said. Marco cost us $311,710, and I'm sure you would have liked to have had that money for something else.
Yeah, I know.
Daily
Yeah, it's
bread.
because I spent $120 a day in CCA, you know?
Yeah. So
Plus
that's-
medication, plus this and
Plus,
yeah.
plus, that's the basics.
Yes.
But when you look at this lovely agenda, and thank you so much, Esther, it's a beautiful agenda, and thank you so much for sharing your story, because that's the most important thing, to have the story of the individual. This says we want to reshape the national conversation to find common ground. But I don't believe you're going to find common ground until you put his face on it with the cost, because the other side of it says each inmate creates 28 jobs. Really? I don't know if that's true or not, but I Googled it. That's what Google says. You know, both of us are depending on Google. But however many jobs it creates, I don't think they're really great jobs. And we need to have people, you need to change their complete way of thinking, because America, as an incarceration nation, is only thinking about how we can punish. It's about punishment. I served 7 years in an Arizona prison, 7 years. It affects your psyche. It affects your spirit. So I understand it's punishment. And even though you are not a criminal, that's a punishment. And we have to think about how to educate the public on what it's costing first. And not $2 billion, but individually. Because that story is the only thing that's going to affect them. Because otherwise they say, well, they deserve it, and you know, what do you expect, and that's what we're going to do. No, we're better than that. Americans are better than that. They just don't know. And as witnessed by this is open to the public, but we need...
Well, that's a question for all of us today and beyond today. That's exactly why Human Rights has convened this session. And from, little discussions, larger ones can start.
I think the first one, change the people in their power, because somebody save money in your pack, When you see in the Congress, okay, it need more. You go in the same prison, you go in the same detention, all the time is the best inmate, all the time. You have in the PCJ, you have 435 beds available for the ICE. But if you have 200 people over there, it's too much. or having another 200 beds. But I pay, full or no, I pay. Somebody saving money, it's not me. I'm okay making money for somebody, in the last 7 years.
Yeah.
But I don't receive it. On time I receive $1 a day when I receive it,
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Question about, these detention facilities are very removed from any area, they're in rural areas. Do you have any data on how many detainees from other states are in detention? Because I don't know where Marco was